The transport vessel Seraph's Mercy had stopped feeling like a ship weeks ago. It felt more like a grave that refused to finish its work. Captain Kalen sat alone on the darkened bridge with his elbows resting on his knees. The emergency lighting painted the room in dim amber colors, making every face appear older and more exhausted. Half the command consoles no longer worked. The remaining screens flickered with dying power cells and ugly warning symbols that no one bothered to acknowledge anymore. There was no point. They had memorized every alarm by heart. The vessel had once carried medical supplies and civilian refugees for the small colony worlds of the Illyrian Concord. It had never been built for war. It had certainly never been designed to survive an attack by the Vorak Dominion. Yet somehow, after 3 weeks drifting through the silent emptiness between stars, it still clung stubbornly to life. Barely. Lieutenant Sierra stepped onto the bridge with heavy movements. Even the sound of her claws against the floor had grown weaker. "Life support reserves are down another 3%, she said quietly. Kalen didn't answer. "We lost compartment 29. Still nothing. Captain." Kalen finally raised his tired eyes. The once proud silver scales around his face had become dull. His uniform hung loosely from his thin frame. "How many?" Sierra swallowed. "4. Kalen closed his eyes. "Names?" She handed him the datapad. He read each name slowly. Navigator Tesh, child refugee Miral, old caretaker Sevek. The captain stared at the final name longer than the others. Sevek had been over 100 years old. He had spent his final days entertaining frightened children by telling stories while pretending not to be hungry. Kalen handed back the datapad. "Add them to the memorial. There are already 216 names. Add them." Sierra nodded silently. Neither spoke again. What words remained? They had transmitted distress calls across every known frequency. Hundreds of them. The Galactic Assembly acknowledged receipt, but offered condolences instead of ships. Merchant guilds refused to enter Vorak-controlled space. Military coalitions declared the region too dangerous. Some governments didn't even answer. The crew learned the truth the hard way. The galaxy had measured the cost of saving them and decided they were too expensive. In the medical ward, Dr. Celine Veris forced herself to stand despite her shaking legs. The room was full of suffering. Patients lay wrapped in blankets while machines struggled to conserve power. There were no proper medications left. The nutrient supplies had nearly vanished. She had not slept more than 2 hours a day in almost a month. One of the children, a little female named Lyra, tugged weakly at her sleeve. "Doctor?" Celine smiled despite her exhaustion. "Yes? Will my father wake up?" Celine looked toward the bed. Lyra's father was unconscious. His injuries should have killed him days ago. She sat beside the girl. "He is strong, like Captain Kalen?" Celine nodded. "Yes," Lyra smiled. "Then he'll wake up." Celine felt tears trying to escape. She turned away before the child could see. Not because she wanted to lie, because she no longer knew how to tell children that hope could die. Hours later, Captain Kalen stood before the remaining crew inside the cargo bay. Nearly 700 survivors looked back at him. Most were civilians, farmers, teachers, children, old people. He saw fear in every eye. He saw hunger. He saw despair, and he hated himself. "My friends," he began softly. His voice cracked. He stopped. No captain should sound broken, but he was. He cleared his throat. "We have enough oxygen for perhaps 30 hours. Nobody moved. We have enough food for less than 20. Still silence. "We have sent our final distress call." He paused. No one cried. Nobody screamed. They were simply too tired. If no answer comes, his voice failed again. A small child stepped forward. Lyra. She looked up at him with innocent eyes. "Captain?" Kalen forced a smile. "Yes? Did they hear us?" The entire cargo bay watched. 700 souls waiting for the answer. Kalen knelt before her. "Yes." "Then why aren't they coming?" The captain looked away. For the first time in his life, he could not answer. Because there was no answer that would make sense to a child. Far away from the dying ship, beyond forgotten sectors and disputed borders, a world spun beneath violent weather. Earth. The birthplace of humanity. The death world. For thousands of years, the galaxy had spoken of Earth in fearful whispers. A planet of unstable tectonic plates, predators, deadly diseases, hurricanes, volcanoes, violence. Humans themselves were considered terrifying. Too resilient, too emotional, too stubborn. Entire studies had been written about how impossible human survival instincts seemed. Nobody truly understood them, and humans preferred it that way. Deep beneath the mountains of Alaska, listening station Argus continued its endless work. Rows of aging antennas scanned the universe. Old equipment, simple systems, dedicated people. Senior technician Amelia Reyes rubbed her eyes while drinking cold coffee. She had been working for 16 hours. "Another false signal?" muttered operator James Holden. "Probably." Then the speakers crackled. Both froze. The room became silent. Distorted voices, weak transmissions, crying, a child. And then a tired voice. "This is civilian vessel Seraph's Mercy. We have 700 survivors. Oxygen critical." "Please," Static interrupted. Then another voice. "Anyone." James slowly lowered his headset. Amelia stared at the monitor. Neither moved. Finally, James whispered, "Jesus!" Amelia replayed the message. The voice of Captain Kalen echoed through the room. Broken, exhausted, not demanding help, not threatening, just asking. Silence hung over the station. Then Amelia stood up. Patch Washington. Hours later, world leaders argued across secure channels. The room was filled with politicians, admirals, and advisors. President Eleanor Walker listened quietly while others debated. They are outside our territory. It could be a trap. Vorak space is unstable. The costs are enormous. We have no treaty obligations. General Marcus Hale finally spoke. His voice was deep and calm. No alliance, no strategic value. Minimal, Marcus nodded. And 700 civilians. Silence. Someone sighed. We can't save everyone. Marcus stared at the screen. No. His eyes hardened. But we can save them. Arguments erupted. Risk assessments, political consequences, military losses. Economic concerns. Marcus listened to every objection. Then he spoke again. My mother was a nurse. The room quieted. When I was 10 years old, she worked 70 hours straight after a hurricane. I asked her why. Nobody interrupted. Marcus continued. She told me something I never forgot. His voice became quieter. People don't stop being people because they're far away. Silence filled the conference room. President Walker leaned forward. General, Madam President, if we do this, ships, Marcus answered immediately. Everything necessary. And if the Vorak attack, then they attack. The president studied him. You sound awfully certain. Marcus nodded once. Because 700 souls are waiting for somebody. Hours later, Earth moved. Shipyards awakened. Factories roared. Military crews ran through corridors. Medical teams loaded supplies. Engineers worked without rest. Thousands of volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Doctors canceled vacations. Cargo handlers sweated under massive containers. Nobody asked whether the refugees were human. Nobody cared. Commander Marcus Hale walked through the immense hangar of the battleship Resolute. Its armored hull towered above workers like a mountain of steel. Nearby floated hospital ships, supply carriers, escort destroyers, fuel tenders, everything needed for a rescue operation. Dr. Elena Ross met him beside the loading ramps. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. 800 medical personnel, Marcus nodded. No, she smiled tiredly. But we'll make it enough. Cargo loaders pushed crates past them. Blankets, food, medicine, toys. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Toys? Elena shrugged. Children are scared. The commander smiled. Fair point. Nearby, a young Marine asked another soldier, what are these aliens like? The older man tightened his armor. Don't know. You nervous? Sure. Then why volunteer? The Marine thought for a moment. My daughter asked where I was going, and I told her some people needed help. The younger soldier smiled. Good enough reason. Thousands of engines ignited across the fleet. News broadcasts covered every screen on Earth. Families gathered. Workers stopped to watch. School children waved flags. Not because humanity sought war. Not because victory was promised. But because 700 strangers had asked, and Earth had answered. Deep in space, aboard the Seraph's Mercy, Captain Kalen recorded his final message. His voice was weak. This is Captain Kalen of the Illyrian vessel, Seraph's Mercy. He glanced at the sleeping children nearby. If anyone receives this, his eyes watered. Tell our families that we tried. He stopped. Sira stood beside him. Neither spoke. Then the Proximus alarm suddenly exploded across the bridge. Every surviving crew member jumped. Sira's eyes widened. Multiple signatures. Kalen rushed forward. Vorak, no! Then who? Her voice trembled. Captain, thousands of contacts appeared. Not enemy ships, not debris. An armada. Huge. Impossible. And on the other side of the galaxy, Commander Marcus Hale stood upon the bridge of the battleship Resolute as stars stretched into brilliant rivers of light. The fleet entered slipspace. Steel mountains disappeared into the darkness. And 700 dying souls abandoned by the galaxy had absolutely no idea that something terrifying was coming for them. Not monsters, not conquerors, not death, but humanity. And humanity had no intention of arriving quietly. 23 hours. That was all Captain Kalen had left, perhaps less. The numbers on the bridge display no longer mattered. Everyone aboard the Seraph's Mercy had memorized them. Oxygen reserves, water reserves, emergency battery capacity, medical power. Every reading had become another countdown toward the same ending. Nobody talked much anymore. Exhaustion had stolen words. Even fear required energy. Lieutenant Sira stared at the tactical display with wide eyes. The thousands of signatures that had suddenly appeared were still there. They weren't fading. They weren't changing course. They were coming directly toward them. Kalen slowly approached. Confirm. Her claws trembled over the controls. I've confirmed 5 times. Enemo. Unknown? Unknown. The bridge remained silent. 700 souls were watching their final moments unfold. And suddenly an impossible fleet had appeared out of nowhere. The captain stared at the display. Thousands of vessels, large signatures, very large signatures, and they were moving with terrifying speed. Sira swallowed. Captain, one of those ships is bigger than our entire station back home. Nobody answered. The oldest officer on the bridge, communications specialist Heron, quietly whispered, "Gods preserve us." Then another signal arrived. Not weapons, not targeting locks. A transmission. Simple, clear, strong. The bridge speakers came alive. "This is Human Expeditionary Fleet 17. Calling civilian vessel Seraph's Mercy. Repeat, this is Human Expeditionary Fleet 17. Hold your position. Rescue operations are beginning immediately." Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Kalen blinked. "Human?" Heron looked confused. The Deathworlders, nobody on the bridge had ever met one. Nobody wanted to. Entire generations had grown up hearing stories about humanity. Violent, unpredictable, fearless. Creatures born on a world where almost everything tried to kill them. Children learned cautionary tales about humans. Soldiers studied them with nervous respect. And now an entire fleet of them had appeared. Captain Kalen slowly sat down. His legs simply gave out beneath him. He covered his face with both hands. Not because he was afraid, because someone had answered after 30 days. Someone had actually come. Across the ship, word spread. The message reached the cargo bay, then the medical ward, then every compartment still supporting life. Dr. Celine Veris nearly dropped her instruments. "Humans," she repeated. One nurse nodded. "Thousands of ships." Another medic laughed. Not because anything was funny. The poor man had simply forgotten how to cry. Little Lyra tugged at Celine's sleeve. "Doctor, yes? Are they heroes?" Celine opened her mouth. No answer came. Instead, tears rolled down her face, and she nodded. Meanwhile, space itself seemed to split apart. The human expeditionary fleet emerged. The first thing the survivors noticed was the size. Human ships looked nothing like the elegant vessels of the galactic powers. There was no beauty, no curves, no graceful designs. These things looked brutal, heavy, industrial. Blocky mountains of dark metal. Their hulls bore scars. Massive armor plates covered every surface. Gigantic engines glowed blue against the void. The battleship Resolute alone dwarfed the Seraph's Mercy. To the exhausted refugees, it looked less like a ship and more like a moving continent. Thousands of smaller vessels surrounded it. Hospital ships, supply carriers, escort destroyers, repair craft, tankers, rescue frigates. It wasn't an invasion fleet. It was an entire civilization moving as one. Commander Marcus Hale stood calmly upon the bridge. "Status, arrived. Enemy contacts? Nah. Survivor conditions?" A young officer looked pale. "Their readings are terrible, sir." Marcus nodded. "Begin operations." The officer hesitated. "No introductions?" Marcus looked at him. "They're dying." That was the end of the discussion. Throughout the fleet, thousands of humans sprang into action. Cargo bases opened. Medical teams prepared. Shuttles launched. Docking crews moved. Nobody celebrated their arrival. Nobody posed for cameras. There would be time later. Right now, people needed help. Dr. Elena Ross adjusted her gloves while rushing towards Shuttle 3. One of her nurses yawned. Another nearly stumbled from exhaustion. Elena looked at them. "When was the last time either of you slept?" "Yesterday, liar." 2 days. Better. The nurse smiled weakly. "We didn't come all this way to nap." Elena nodded. "Fair enough." The rescue shuttles crossed the darkness. From the windows, the medics finally saw the Seraph's Mercy, and silence filled every shuttle. The ship looked horrible. Entire sections were black. Hull damage covered every surface. Emergency lights flickered weakly. Parts of the vessel had been patched with scrap material. The humans exchanged glances. Nobody said anything, but many felt anger. Not at the crew, at whoever had abandoned them. Docking clamps connected. The airlocks opened. And for the first time in history, humans and Illyrians stood face to face. Captain Kalen waited with the remaining officers. He had prepared himself, or so he thought. Then they stepped through, massive, broad shoulders, heavy boots, armored uniforms. The first human looked enormous, not because he intended intimidation, he simply was. His face carried scars, his hair had begun turning gray, and his tired blue eyes met Kalen's own, Commander Marcus Hale. For several seconds, neither moved. The legends, the myths, the stories. And standing before him, the Deathworlder simply extended his hand. "I'm Commander Marcus Hale." Kalen blinked. Marcus smiled softly. "We heard your call." Those 4 words shattered the captain. He covered his mouth. 30 days of suffering. 30 days of hopelessness. 30 days of watching his people die. And the first thing this terrifying creature had said was, "We heard your call." Kalen's legs nearly failed again. Marcus immediately grabbed him. "Easy. I'm sorry. Nothing to apologize for. I failed them." Marcus looked around the damaged corridor. "No," his voice was calm and heavy. "You kept them alive." Kalen broke. Years of discipline disappeared, he cried. Not quietly, not with dignity. He simply cried. And the human commander held his shoulders and waited. No speeches, no embarrassment, just patience. The medical team spread through the vessel. Dr. Elena Ross entered the overcrowded infirmary. She froze. Everyone froze. The exhausted aliens stared at the humans. The humans stared back, and what they saw nearly broke their hearts. Malnourished children, starving civilians, burned victims. untreated wounds, people wrapped in blankets because heating systems had failed. Dr. Celine Veris stepped forward. She looked like she might collapse. Elena spoke gently. "I'm Dr. Elena Ross." Celine's eyes watered. "I have 38 patients in critical condition." Elena nodded. "We brought 800 medical personnel." Celine stared. 800? Yes, you misunderstood. No, I only have 38 critical patients. Elena smiled. "Then we'll have plenty of hands." Celine finally collapsed into a chair. Not from weakness, relief. For the first time in 30 days, she wasn't alone. Hours passed. Human boots thundered through corridors. Heavy crates arrived. Fresh water, food, medicine, blankets, portable heaters, replacement batteries. Everywhere, exhausted humans worked without stopping. Some had bloodshot eyes. Others had sweat running down their faces. Nobody complained. One Marine spent 2 hours repairing a broken toy for Lyra. Another soldier carried elderly refugees on his back because they were too weak to walk. Human cooks prepared meals. Human engineers restored power. Human nurses refused to leave bedsides. At one point, Dr. Celine found Elena still working. "You haven't rested." Elena smiled. "Neither have you. We should sleep." "We should." Neither moved. Hours later, Celine discovered Elena asleep while sitting upright beside a patient's bed. The human doctor still held a datapad in one hand. She had fallen asleep during treatment. Celine quietly covered her with a blanket, then returned to work. Something strange began happening. Fear vanished. Children laughed again. People smiled. The dark corridors of the Seraph's Mercy slowly became back to life. Captain Kalen found Marcus standing alone near a viewing window. The commander looked tired, older somehow. "You should rest," Kalen said. Marcus chuckled. "My doctors keep saying that." Kalen stood beside him. "Why?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why what? Why come?" The human thought for a moment. "You asked. Others ignored us." Marcus nodded. "They shouldn't have. We are strangers." "No." Kalen looked confused. Marcus folded his arms. "My people have a saying." "What saying?" He smiled softly. "Strangers are just friends you haven't met yet." Kalen laughed for the first time in over a month. Then alarm screamed. Every light on the corridor turned red. Both men froze. Marcus's expression changed instantly. Gone was the gentle rescuer. Gone was the tired doctor escort. Now stood a soldier. Cold, focused, dangerously calm. The bridge erupted into chaos. "Commander," Marcus rushed in. "Report." The tactical officer swallowed. "Multiple hyperspace signatures. Identify." Silence. Then the answer came. "Vorik Dominion. 20 dreadnoughts emerged from darkness. The same enemy that had crippled the Seraph's Mercy. The same enemy that had hunted civilians." Captain Kalen felt terror wash through him. "No." Sierra's voice trembled. "They found us." Across the bridge, every human officer remained calm, almost frighteningly calm. Marcus looked at the numbers. 20 dreadnoughts, more than enough firepower to destroy the refugees. He nodded once. "Understood." The communications officer looked up. "Orders, sir?" Marcus spoke with quiet certainty. "Signal the fleet." Thousands of human ships responded instantly. Hospital ships withdrew. Medical transports retreated. Supply vessels moved behind defensive lines. And then the battleships advanced. Massive armored hulls shifted forward. Destroyers accelerated. Cruisers repositioned. Like giant walls of steel, the Deathworlder fleet placed itself between the enemy and the dying refugee vessel. Not behind it, not beside it, in front of it. Commander Marcus Hale stared at the tactical display. His voice remained calm. "Bring us ahead." The gigantic battleship Resolute moved first. One after another, hundreds of human warships followed. A wall, an unbreakable wall. Captain Kalen stared in disbelief. "They'll destroy themselves." Marcus never looked away from the screen. "No." His voice was steady. "They'll have to destroy us first." And throughout the fleet, battle alarms began to howl. Not one human ship moved aside. Not one. Because behind them were 700 souls. And humanity had come far too far to leave anyone behind. No one aboard the Seraph's Mercy had expected to witness another battle. Most of them had already accepted death weeks earlier. They had made peace with unfinished lives, with families they would never see again, and with names that would eventually become forgotten records inside government archives. Yet now, as the massive human warships formed a shield around them, something far stranger than fears spread throughout the survivors. They felt guilt. Captain Kalen stood silently beside Commander Marcus Hale on the bridge of the battleship Resolute. The enormous tactical display showed 20 Vorik dreadnoughts emerging from hyperspace. The enemy vessels were sleek and predatory, their dark hulls lined with weapon batteries, and between those warships and the Seraph's Mercy stood Earth, not hiding, not retreating, standing. Kalen stared at the screen. "They'll kill you." Marcus folded his arms. "Possibly. There are 700 of us. Yes, your fleet number's in the thousands." "Correct," Kalen cracked. "Then why?" Marcus looked at him. "Because there are 700 of you." The answer almost hurt. Kalen had spent 30 days learning what abandonment felt like. He had forgotten what decency looked like. Across the fleet, alarms echoed through corridors. Sailors hurried to stations. Engineers secured power systems. Marines prepared emergency response teams. Nobody panicked. Nobody celebrated. The mood felt strangely calm, like workers preparing for another difficult day. Lieutenant Sarah Bennett tightened the straps on her armor and sat beside her squad. Private Miguel Torres checked his rifle. Neither expected to use it. Space battles rarely involved boarding actions. Still, preparation was habit. Miguel smiled. Think they'll attack? Sarah shrugged. Hope not. You scared? She chuckled. Terrified. He blinked. You don't look scared. Sarah leaned back. My grandfather landed during the Pacific campaign. What does that have to do with anything? He told me courage isn't being fearless. Miguel smiled. What is it then? She checked her equipment. Being scared and showing up anyway. Meanwhile, aboard Vorkuk flagship Blood of Dominion, Supreme Commander Varkun studied the impossible scene before him. His officers looked confused. One finally spoke. The refugees are protected. We can see that. Shall we target the escorts? No. Another officer frowned. The humans are Deathworlders. Varkun growled. I know what they are. The bridge became silent. Everyone in the galaxy knew about humanity. Nobody truly understood them. Their psychology made little sense. They fought fiercely. Yet they offered aid to enemies. They possessed terrifying weapons, yet preferred diplomacy. Their behavior seemed irrational. Varkun narrowed his eyes. What are they protecting? A damaged civilian vessel. No strategic importance? Nah. No military value? Nah. No resources? Nah. The commander frowned. Then he quietly muttered. Then why are they here? No one had an answer. A communication officer interrupted. Human transmission incoming. Display it. Commander Marcus Hale appeared on the screen. His tired eyes showed no anger, no hatred, no arrogance, only absolute certainty. Vorak vessels. This is Commander Marcus Hale of the United Earth Expeditionary Fleet. Varkun stared. Marcus continued. Behind my ships are 700 civilians under Earth's protection. Varkun laughed. Protection? They are not your species. No, they are not your allies. No, they are strangers. Marcus nodded. Not anymore. The Vorak command bridge became silent. Varkun leaned forward. You are willing to fight and die for strangers? Marcus's answer came immediately. Yes, the alien commander stared. Not because he found the answer brave, but because he found it incomprehensible. You would sacrifice thousands? Marcus remained calm. No. His eyes hardened. We would sacrifice ourselves. Silence. Cold silence. Every officer aboard the Blood of Dominion stopped breathing. Because Marcus Hale had spoken those words without drama, without threats, without pride. Simple truth. Varkun looked behind the human commander. Rows of officers stood at attention. None showed fear. None objected. They had accepted it, and somehow that frightened him more than any weapon. Back aboard the Resolute, Captain Kalen whispered. You truly mean it? Marcus nodded. Yes, you would die if necessary. For us, for what's right. Kalen lowered his head. His hands shook. For 30 days, he had watched governments debate whether his people were worth saving, and now an entire civilization had answered that question without hesitation. A young communications officer interrupted. Commander, all ships report ready. Marcus nodded. Good. Awaiting your orders. Marcus inhaled slowly. Hold formation. Across thousands of vessels, those words spread. Hold formation. Not attack, not fire, not advance. Simply hold. The giant armored ships remained motionless, like mountains, like guardians, like promises made of steel. Hours passed. Neither fleet moved. Tension filled space itself. Then something unexpected happened. Varkun broke, not through fear, through understanding. He stared once more at the refugees hidden behind the human wall, then at the countless human vessels, then at Marcus Hale. Slowly, the Vorak commander leaned back. Withdraw, the bridge officer stared. My commander? Withdraw. But we can win, Varkun shook his head. No, the officer blinked. Their numbers? Not numbers. Their commander looked tired. Anyone willing to die for strangers has already defeated us. One by one, the Vorak ships turned away, their engines ignited. And 20 dreadnoughts disappeared into hyperspace. No shots, no explosions, no heroes carved from battle, only silence. On the bridge of the Resolute, nobody cheered, nobody celebrated. Marcus simply exhaled. The tension disappeared from his shoulders. Then Lieutenant Sarah Bennett whispered, Thank God. And suddenly the bridge erupted, not with victory, with relief. People laughed, some cried, others embraced. Captain Kalen stood frozen after everything. After all the suffering, no one had died. Marcus noticed his expression. You seem disappointed. Kalen blinked. What? Marcus smiled. I prefer this ending. Days turned into weeks. The fleet began the journey toward Illyria. The Seraph's Mercy no longer drifted helplessly. Human engineers repaired her systems. Human doctors restored her patients. Human cooks introduced strange foods that children absolutely loved. Little Lyra became obsessed with chocolate. Commander Marcus quickly discovered that children were much scarier than war. One afternoon, she climbed into his lap. You are very big. Marcus laughed. I've been told. Do humans eat mountains? No, you look like mountain. Nearby officers nearly choked, trying not to laugh. Marcus smiled. Fair enough. Dr. Elena Ross and Dr. Celine Varys became inseparable. Neither woman knew when friendship had formed. It simply happened. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they laughed. Most nights they fell asleep over medical reports. One evening, Celine quietly asked, "Why are humans like this?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like this." Elena thought for a moment. "My father was a firefighter. And he always said, if somebody cries for help, you go. Even if they're strangers?" Elena smiled. "Especially then." Weeks later, the fleet finally reached Illyria, and nothing could have prepared them for what awaited. Millions. The entire planet seemed gathered. Every city, every screen, every street. Families held photographs, children held flowers, parents prayed, grandparents cried. They had believed the Seraph's mercy was gone forever. Captain Kalen stood in silence as the ships descended. His breathing became uneven. Sira stood beside him. Neither could speak. The entire sky above Illyria was filled with human ships. Thousands of giants, protecting one battered refugee vessel, and then the transmission reached the surface. Seraph's mercy returning home. The planet broke, not with violence, with tears. Millions cried. Mothers collapsed. Children screamed with joy. Old fathers embraced each other. Across entire cities, strangers hugged strangers. Doctor Celine saw Lyra reunited with her unconscious father, now healthy and awake. The little girl wrapped herself around him and refused to let go. Even hardened Marines quietly wiped their eyes. Commander Marcus stood alone near a window. He hated attention, he hated speeches. But President Eleanor Walker called. "Commander, Madam President, you need to see this." She activated a galactic broadcast. Every major civilization, every government, every world, watching. The story had spread. Not the battle, not the ships, not the weapons, the rescue. For the first time in history, billions saw humanity not as monsters, not as Deathworlders, not as conquerors, but as something far stranger. People who answered. Captain Kalen stepped before the cameras. His silver scales had regained their shine. His voice remained heavy with emotion. "When we were abandoned, Earth heard us." He paused. "And they came." Tears filled his eyes. "They crossed impossible distances. They worked without rest. They fed our children. They carried our elderly. They stood between us and death." His voice broke. "And when war came, they stood ready to die for people whose names they did not even know." The galaxy listened, silently. Kalen smiled. "The universe fears Deathworlders." He looked toward Marcus. "They should not." His eyes watered. "Because the greatest weapon Earth possesses is not its fleets. It is not its soldiers. It is not its strength. It is its heart." Months later, a new phrase began appearing throughout the galaxy. Rescue stations displayed it. Hospitals displayed it. Civilian ships painted it across their hulls. Children memorized it. And every time disaster struck, every time fear seemed stronger than hope, every time someone believed they had been forgotten, those simple words spread once again. "Hold on. We are coming." And somewhere on old Earth, beneath storms and scars and endless human imperfections, people simply called it doing the right thing. The galaxy called it a miracle. Humanity called it a promise.